Hello, I'm Beverly Lewis with the Florida Bar Center for Professionalism, and welcome to another in our historical video series. Today we're in the offices of Mr. Walter Arnold in Jacksonville, Florida. The date is April 30th, the year is 2001, and I'm holding a letter which will serve as an introduction to our interview today. A little unusual. It's dated April 23rd, 2001, and it's signed Rutledge R. Lyles. It's to Mr. Arnold. It says, "Dear Walter, enjoying a quiet moment following a 3-week jury trial that left my client very happy, I started thinking of the learning process that brought me to where I am today as a trial lawyer. There are so many occasions where people, perhaps unknowingly, make a real difference in our lives, and we never take the time to tell them. I don't want that to happen here. When people ask me who was my mentor, there's only one name I give them, and that is Walter Arnold. You taught me how to be a trial lawyer. You taught me the value of preparation to such an extent that many might say I over-prepare, although in my view there's no such thing. You taught me the critical art of cross-examination and art of opening and closing arguments through example. I've always tried to pattern myself after you and the way you skillfully approach your cases. I will never forget the mastery of your closing argument in the Lester Sanders bribery trial. Now that I have young lawyers working under my mentorship, I truly realize how important a good teacher is. I learned so much from you, and am doing my best to pass on the knowledge and skills. I did not want this moment to pass without saying thank you. Sincerely, Rutledge R. Lyles." And Mr. Arnold, thank you so very much for taking time to be with us today. It's a great honor.
I appreciate the honor bestowed upon me by you and the Florida Bar.
Well, with that beginning, very auspicious beginning, I want to go back to the beginning. I want to ask you about the early days in your career, and I'd like to go so far back as law school. Tell us, please, about where you went to law school and some of those experiences.
The way that I went to law school, I was in high school, and my grades were mediocre, until I ended up in a bookkeeping class taught by Earl Latimer, the vice principal of Andrew Jackson High School. And I was always good at mathematics, and Mr. Latimer encouraged me to make better grades in all my subjects. And he even took me under his tutelage. Instead of going to study hall, like the rest of the students, I would go down in the principal's office and work, delivering messages to the teachers and sorting papers and this sort of thing. And he took a real interest in me. And he advised me that without a college degree, I'd be regulated to maybe a shoe clerk or a salesman in a grocery store or a truck driver or something like that. And he encouraged me to go to college. There were a few law books in the library, Andrew Jackson High School, which I looked at time to time, and I liked what I read there. And it came to my mind that law was nothing else but common sense and reasoning, and that I could handle the law all right. So I didn't have any money, and my mother and father were divorced, and my mother was the sole means of support at that time by the operation of a dairy farm that we had and a farm. So I didn't know how I was going to go to college. But then the legislature of Florida created a scholarship known as the Duval High School Memorial Scholarship in memorializing the old Duval High School, which was the only high school in Duval County until Andrew Jackson, Landing High, and Lehigh were created. This scholarship paid $250 a year, not a semester. I was awarded that scholarship, which afforded me the opportunity to go to the University of Florida. I took the course there that you could go in pre-law for 2 years and law school for 3 years and obtain an LLB degree. I took the shortcut, of course. I loved the law loved me, and we got along great. I led my class, and there were about 70 in my class, in grades from the time I entered law school until I graduated. I graduated in 1936 with highest honors. And while in law school, I was elected chancellor of the honor court of the University of Florida. And I was also appointed assistant law librarian, which meant that I would keep the library open 6 nights a week until 10 o'clock, from 5 to 10, which I was happy to do, and if any student wanted to stay later than 10, I was glad to accommodate him and keep the library open. And they would come to me with their various problems, and I'd try to be of assistance to them and helpful to them. I met many good friends that way who forwarded me cases in later years, and I was very happy for the relationship that I had with them. On my graduation from University of Florida Law School, with my good grades and wonderful record and all, I still had no job, and jobs were not available. There's the middle of the Depression in 1936, and I walked the streets of Jacksonville trying to find an opening. The best that would be offered to me was just office space, no salary, but would divide the amount of income that I brought in. Well, I had no clients. I had no way of obtaining clients. But then Julian Fant, who was the county attorney, that's for the days of consolidation, he offered me a job assisting him and his law partner, William A. Stanley. Stanley had been elected to the legislature and would be away from the office for a substantial period of time. And I was to help Mr. Fant and do the work of Mr. Stanley. And Mr. Stanley represented the city of Jacksonville Beach, and Mr. Fant, of course, represented Duval County. So they agreed to pay me the sum of $50 a month, which was big money for me and great money. I stayed with Fant and Stanley until 1938, when they lost their majority on the Board of County Commissioners, and Mr. Fant was no longer a county attorney. I then became assistant county solicitor of Duval County under Wayne Ripley, who was the county solicitor. My job was to prosecute all criminal cases in the criminal court of record, except capital cases. The judge of the criminal court of record was Brian Simpson, who had been a former assistant state attorney, and he was well versed in criminal law and was a great judge, and he was very helpful to me. I served in that capacity as assistant county solicitor until World War II broke out. When World War II broke out, I became a civilian agent for the Office of Naval Intelligence and was assigned to Miami. We worked down there for over a year. William Hallows, the state attorney then, he was also in the same program. I was commissioned a Lieutenant JG in the Naval Reserve, but the FBI gradually took over our work, investigating alleged sabotage and matters of that kind, and we were left pretty much with nothing to do. So I applied for sea duty. Well, Admiral Fortson was the head of naval intelligence, and he didn't want to lose any of his manpower, and he would deny my applications for sea duty. Finally, after about the third or fourth, he granted it. I was sent to Fort Schuyler, New York for my initial sea duty training. Of course, I had visions of being a deck officer on a carrier or a battleship or a destroyer or cruiser or something of that nature. Well, the Navy had different ideas about it. And I ended up at Camp Bradford, Virginia, being trained for an officer on a landing ship, LST. And after about 3 months there, I, along with 8 other officers and a crew of 125, were assigned to a landing ship being built in Seneca, Illinois. The captain of the ship was Captain Roach, and I was the executive officer. We went to the Pacific in that position and went to the New Hebrides Islands, Espiritu Santos, and at that time they were making the invasion of Leyte Gulf, and the captain of another landing ship engaged in that invasion had been knocked by a suicide plane from the bridge down to the deck and badly injured, had to be sent back to the States. The executive officer of that ship was fairly young and immature, so they picked me up and flew me to Leyte Gulf, where I took command of my ship. And not to get into great detail about it, we made the invasions of Leyte Gulf, Corregidor, Mariveles Harbor, Subic Bay, Pollock Harbor, Zamboanga, Cebu City, and Bruni Bay, Borneo. At which time the war ended. I came back to the States and assumed my old position of assistant county solicitor. But it no longer appealed to me. I really was not too interested in prosecuting people. I wanted to help the individual. So I went into private practice by myself, and right off I got a number of clients. Some of them engaged in the Bolita business and whatnot. And from there on out, I was more or less a sole practitioner for many, many years. And then I started taking in associates and partners. And at one time, I had a firm with 4 lawyers in it. And I helped train my associates and my partners in primarily eminent domain law and criminal law. Those were my chief interests. So I continued on that, and I still practice law to some extent in those fields. So that's just about the story of my legal career.
Well, I wonder, you mentioned a few names in there of people who were significant to you in your career. Is there anyone you particularly think of as a mentor during those years?
My mentors were my mother and Earl Latimer before I went to law school. After I got in law school, I cultivated the friendship of 3 of the professors there, Dean Harry Tressler, Judge Cockrell, and Clarence Teasell. And they guided me and gave me help when it was necessary. After I got out of law school, my mentors was Julian Fant, who was employed me, Brian Simpson, Judge Brian Simpson, Judge DeWitt Gray, who was a senior circuit judge, and William Hallows, who was the state attorney. And they're the ones that I could go to for advice and encouragement on how to handle cases.
Was there anyone who really inspired you, who was a hero to you?
No, not unless it was Earl Latimer, who really got me started on thinking about going to college and making something out of myself.
That would be heroic in a young man's life.
He was a hero in my books, yes.
And I hear the way you speak of your mother. I think
And my mother.
Extraordinary.
My mother was a good woman, and she believed in doing the right thing, and she instilled that in her children.
We talked earlier about what working on a dairy farm will do for a young person.
Oh, that was 7 days a week. You had to get up 5 o'clock in the morning and milk those cows and deliver milk. And this was for the days of what we call the no-fence laws. And the cows were permitted to roam all over the territory, wherever they wanted to go. And I had a little marsh pony, and in the afternoon I'd have to saddle up that pony, round up the cows, and bring them back in for more milking.
That sounds like it might be good preparation.
Then I had a paper route I carried for the old Jacksonville Journal.
Oh, my goodness.
Any ways to make money. Had to.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, it might be good preparation for a career in law, having to round up all kinds of things. Well, tell me, you've seen such a wide span of history, legal history. What are the changes that strike you most in the years that you've been a part of this scene?
Changes in the practice of law?
Yes, sir.
One is the wide discovery that we enjoy now. When I started practicing law, you went in the courtroom blinded. You didn't know who the witnesses were going to be on the other side. You didn't know what the state's case was all about. Now you can make discovery and ascertain all that information before you ever try your case, which is very helpful and very useful in seeing that justice is done. Secondly, when I started practicing law, there was less than 3,000 lawyers in the state of Florida. Today, I think there's over 60,000 lawyers in the state. At that time, when I started practicing law, lawyers were well respected. They were looked up to. They were gentlemen, and they practiced law because they loved it, and not just for the money in it. We had a few bad characters that chased ambulances and so forth, and they got rid of them. Now you have advertising, which I despise. I'm not saying that the lawyers that advertise are not qualified, but going out and advertising to get clients and holding themselves out and tooting their own horn just cheapens the profession in my books. And in the eyes of the public, I think it's done the same thing, and that's one reason why the lawyers today are held in such low esteem. That movies, TVs, which show lawyers in a bad light, has all caused a degeneration in the image of the lawyer. Now, this day and time, we have a lot of minorities, so-called minorities, in the practice of law, which I think is a good thing. The women particularly, most of them are hard workers, and they want to be successful, and they're very good. So that's been an accomplishment. But those are the major changes. And another change, though, I should mention. Back when I started practicing law, the great majority of lawyers were general practitioners. They handled divorces, civil suits, criminal cases, whatever came in the office, they handled. Because of the complexity of the law today, That's no longer possible, really, as a practical matter. You have to specialize and do 2 or 3 features of the law, and that's it, period. And really, it's a good thing, because the lawyer that specializes is much more competent in that field than the general practitioner was back in the old days.
I wonder what advice you would give to members of your profession. You talked about seeing some of the changes that distress you. What do you think might be done to improve or to work for the better in your profession?
The main thing that I think would be for the better would to instill in the law student and young lawyers a better relationship between the lawyer and his client. To the client, when he has a lawsuit or is in trouble in criminal law, that is a big chapter in his life. That's what he's thinking about day and night. And he wants to be advised and informed. And it's the duty and obligation of the lawyer to keep his client informed and have frank and honest discussions with the client of his chances if he goes to trial, what to look for, what his best hope of success might be, and that sort of thing. And keep up that relationship all the way through the attorney-client connection, right through the end. Now, that what brings other clients to you, in my opinion. The fact that you're honest with your client, you keep him informed or her informed, and they know what's going on. That's the best thing. Another thing is for the lawyer to be prepared to study the case, to interview the witnesses. I don't leave it up to some private investigator to interview witnesses. I want to interview particularly the main witnesses. I want to look at them and see what I think about their character and whether they're telling me the truth or not, and to draw my own conclusions in reference to the witnesses, and to not only be prepared so far as the factual situation is concerned, but don't depend on the judge to know all the law. He can't possibly know all the law. Be prepared in the law, write up memorandums for the court to read and to help you understand the case and to rule accordingly. All those things are very, very important. But the attorney-client relationship is most important. Another thing, too, I think the law schools today should instill in the law students and young lawyers the respect for their fellow lawyers and the court. The court may not be the best, it may not be experienced, but after all, it's the court, not the individual, that you're showing respect for. And at all times, be respectful to them. And be respectful to your fellow lawyers and the witnesses. The witnesses, most of them are there against their will and consent anyway, and you don't need to be abusive to them. Get out, be aggressive, get the knowledge out of them that you want, the information, but don't be abusive. You don't have to be that. And you don't have to be abusive to your fellow attorneys either.
I liked what you said earlier when we were talking about that and about preparation. You said, know the case better than the witness knows the facts of the case.
Know more about the case than your own client knows about it.
And how do you do that besides, well, you talked about spending time with the witnesses. You talked about knowing the law. But what is your particular personal secret for the success of that?
Of knowing the witness?
Yes. How do you analyze the people?
You know, after you go through this thing time and time again, particularly as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, you develop a knack of knowing whether they're shading the truth or whether they're really trying to tell you everything that happened and the full knowledge that they have about the matter. It's just one of those things that you develop. So,
sounds like a lot of
and the same way with your client.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when your client comes in to your first interview, you just don't accept everything that he says as being absolutely the truth. You question him, and if there's doubt in your mind about certain facts, you bear down on it to find out what the truth is, because it's absolutely essential in order to be a successful lawyer and successful in a case that you have the truth out of your client to start with. If you start out on a falsehood, you're in bad shape.
You talked earlier about law schools, law students. I wonder, what do you think of a mentoring program, an official sort of mentoring that's maybe a little more structured than the kind of informal mentoring that might have happened in previous years?
Well, most of my experience has been informal mentoring, and I always cultivated the friendship of a more experienced lawyer, older and more experienced lawyer or judge. For instance, Mr. Fant, he was quite experienced and quite a bit older than me, and also Judge Simpson and Judge Gray, William Hallows, the state attorney. I cultivated that friendship. Well, I'd take them to lunch every now and then, and where I could feel that I could go to them with my problems and get good advice. Now, so far as a formal mentorship is concerned, I think that'd be a pretty good idea, too, to work along these lines. Most older lawyers, they have more time on their hand, and it's a compliment, really, to them to have a young lawyer seek their advice and judgment about matters. And semi-retired lawyers, they're quite willing to give their time and patience and advice to young lawyers and to help them with their problems, give them recommendations and whatnot. And I think that the young lawyers starting out, right out of law school, need assistance of that kind, very much so. I had it. I was very fortunate to have very good mentors.
What do you feel that the legal profession is doing correctly? How is it succeeding these days from your perspective?
I think the legal profession is doing correctly in advocating the seminars that do the educational programs that's being carried on today, which brings the lawyers up to abreast of what the law is, because with all the appellate courts we have this day and time grinding out opinions, it's very, very hard to keep abreast of the major opinions, which would be helpful to them. Another thing in the field of discovery, I think they've done an excellent job there. Another thing that they're doing, the Florida bar, is discipline some of these lawyers that probably shouldn't have been lawyers in the first place, particularly those that neglect their clients, take their money, and don't do anything for them. I don't approve of that at all, or invade their trust accounts, do other things unethical, illegal, unlawful, and do not follow any moral standards. Get rid of them. And that's what Florida Bar is doing, which is a good thing.
You know, it seems to me that you talked about your experiences in the war as redirecting your law career, that you really refocused on a different avenue of practice after that. And I wonder, would you talk a little bit about that for us?
But it did have a great impact on me. Back when I first started in practicing law, and was assistant county solicitor, believe it or not, I was rather timid and self-conscious and afraid maybe to do this, that, and the other. But in that man's Navy, when you were out there and the captain of a ship and everything was resting on your shoulder, you had to take responsibility. You had to make decisions and make them now. And you didn't have the luxury of calling on somebody else for advice. You had to do it yourself. And it taught me to be a person that stands on his own 2 feet, does his own thinking, and accept responsibility. And that's when I decided, after I got out of the Navy, that I would be a sole practitioner defending people accused of crime or whose property was being taken by eminent domain in similar cases.
You said it was the responsibility of having all those people's fates in the palm of your hand.
I had a crew of 125. I had 8 officers under me, and we went in on an invasion. We carried 500 troops, and I was the man that had to see where the minefields were, where the shoals were, where the Japanese fortifications were, and all that is my responsibility, nobody else, and you couldn't push it off on anybody else.
And it seems like there's a clear corollary between that kind of personal responsibility in battle to what you described as a big chapter in somebody's life when they're in need of counsel.
That's right. But whereas a big chapter in somebody's life is only one life, back then in the war, it was hundreds of lives that depended on you.
That's very, very true. What is your definition, then, of professionalism, to go above and beyond?
Professionalism includes ethics, not only the ethics of the Florida Bar, but also good moral standards, the difference between right and wrong, knowing that your moral integrity, honesty. Professionalism goes further than that, though. It means competency. It also includes preparation of your cases, wanting to help your client, a good attorney-client relationship where the client's not afraid to ask you what's going on, and you should tell him what's going on. Keep him or her advised. That's important to them, very important, a lot more important than it is to you. And to be respectful to your fellow lawyers and the judge, the court, and to conduct yourself properly and through hard work and preparation, you'll be able to win your cases, and you do it in a professional sort of a way. That's professionalism.
You sound like a man who has had a strong moral compass his whole life. What would you say were the core beliefs or values of your life that have led you to this path?
The core of my life, particularly since the war, is to help my fellow man. Be helpful. And when you're helpful, it not only helps the person, but it helps you. It makes you feel better. It makes you want to keep on doing the same thing.
Let me ask you, if you could wave a wand, or if you knew that your advice or your exhortation were going to have a complete effect, a profound effect on your profession, on law schools, on the judiciary, what advice would you give if you knew that it were going to be followed?
Well, as to the legal profession, my advice would be that the law schools and the courts should determine who really likes the law and practices the law for the profession itself, and because the lawyer is interested in the law and seeing that justice is done. And that those that are in there purely for making money, get rid of them. Get rid of them, discourage them from being lawyers. They have no place in the marketplace, and they will never really be great successes and never be too helpful to the profession.
Mr. Arnold, thank you so much for your time. This day will live, I think, for many of us.
And I enjoyed the interview very
you,
much. I hope I can be of help to others.
I can't see how you can fail to be of help. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.